Alright folks, buckle up because today we're diving into the wild world of solo acoustic gigs. And I've cooked up a little something that I like to call the 10 Commandments of Solo Acoustic. Whoa, it's not that serious. As you know, I'm all about sharing the wisdom I've gained from over 25 years of playing solo. In that time, I've not only made my fair share of blunders, but I've also witnessed other people stumble along the way. So, I figured it's about time to spill the beans on the top 10 no-nos. Think of it as your ultimate guide to what not to do when you're out playing solo. Now, you're going to want to make sure you stick around till the end because the last one is just as important as the first. Before we dive into the commandments, please do me a solid and hit that like button and smash that subscribe if you're digging this kind of content. All right, let's dive in and let's get the show on the road. Cue the scary music, please. Cue. Number 1, thou shalt not play too loud. Excuse me, could you repeat that? I've come to realize that as musicians, especially as guitarists, we often find ourselves leaning towards the louder side of things. And conveniently, we pin the blame on the drummer. However, belting it out too loudly in venues like restaurants, lounges, or private parties, it can actually detract from the enjoyment of the guests and prevent them from fully savoring their evening with each other. And not to mention, it can take away from their appreciation of just how brilliant your performance is. So in settings like this, I abide by a simple rule, and you can too. I make sure that I could hear the conversations of the people close to me just slightly above my own volume. If their voices are audible to me when I'm playing, then chances are they can enjoy their own chatter among each other as well, and they're not competing with me. And also keep an eye out for visual cues. I mean, if you spot people talking to each other, cupping their ears and having a hard time hearing each other, it's a telltale sign that you're probably a tad too loud. Another thing I found that works that you could do is, before you kick off your set, touch base with the venue or the event organizer or the host and just kindly ask them to alert you if they have any concerns about volume throughout the evening. By doing this, you reassure them that it's perfectly fine to approach you if adjustments are needed, whether you need to turn the volume down or whether you need to pump it up. After all, sometimes they might not voice their discomfort to you, and simply they just would opt not to rebook you. And now you're losing out on a gig, all because the volume was just a little bit too high. I don't want that to happen to you. Commandment number 2, thou shalt not talk too much in between songs.
All right, zip it.
Ah, the infamous zip it moment from Austin Powers. Now, don't get me wrong. Engaging with the audience can be fantastic, and you should do it, but there's a delicate balance that you need to strike. Let me vent a little bit on this because it's a personal pet peeve of mine when I'm out enjoying live music. I just don't like when an artist rambles on between songs. Sure, there's room for some banter in settings like an original gig or a concert-style performance where the crowd is specifically there for you. But in most other cases that we find ourselves in, less is more when it comes to the chit-chat between songs. After all, fewer words means fewer opportunities to stick one's foot in one's mouth. Or maybe I'm just projecting here. All right, let's keep it moving. Commandment number 3, thou shalt not shamelessly ask for tips. I've actually delved into this topic in a whole other video called The Art of the Tip Cup, and I put a link in the description. But for now, let's keep it concise. It's a delicate dance, isn't it? I mean, when it comes to the tip cup, personally, I believe you have to have the tip cup visible, but never directly solicit tips from the guests. Instead, I opt for a little bit of a more subtle approach. If somebody is gracious enough to come up and contribute to the tip cup, I make sure to express my gratitude. I do it over the mic after the song. And not only is it the polite thing to do, but it also lets other people know subtly that there is a tipping option, and you're doing it without applying too much pressure on them. You're just giving them the option. On another note, when it comes to private events, I err on the side of discretion, and I absolutely do not display a tip cup. I think it's a little bit uncouth for occasions like that. However, I mean, I leave that up to your decision. Some situations may be different. So that one is up to you. But don't do it. Number 4, thou shalt not ignore the atmosphere in the room. This job in general is all about reading the room. Okay? Age demographics, for example, can provide you valuable insight into the musical preferences of the people in the room. And if the opportunity arises before you play, try to chat with some of the audience members. Get a feel for their musical tastes. This will give you a nice foundation for selecting songs from your repertoire when you get up there to play. You want to match your music to the mood of the room. Let's say, for example, the room is all upbeat and buzzing with excitement. You want to stick to like feel-good jams. You don't want to play sad songs. But if the vibe is chill and laid back and a lounge, or maybe it's even like a sad environment for some reason, you're not going to catch me busting out the headbangers in a situation like that. Pay attention to the room. Pay attention to the guests. And check the feedback. When you're playing, you'll see if they're nodding their heads and they're into it, they're liking that kind of music, you stick to that. Number 5, thou shalt not play extended loops and solos. All right, let's talk about these extended loops and solos that we as guitarists love to play, guilty as charged. But unless you're booked specifically because looping and guitar craziness is part of your act, okay, then it's best not to drag out the solos and the loops. Again, if you're not a looping artist, that's your draw, then don't just stretch out loops and solos. I mean, nobody wants to watch you noodle for ages, right? Maybe I do, but your average guest and your average listener doesn't. So for me, yeah, I'll throw out a solo here and there where it's appropriate for the song, but I'll wrap it up before I lose the crowd's interest. It's all about leaving them wanting more. Number 6, thou shalt not play the same set in the same order every time. Or as I like to put it, thou shalt mix it up. Especially when you're playing at a spot where you play often and everyone there knows your name, right? Sticking to the same old set list in the same order can start to feel a bit tired, right? Not only to you, but when the bartender can predict your next tune, that means it's time for a change-up. For me, switching it up isn't just about keeping the crowd guessing. It's about keeping myself inspired too. Picking the perfect songs for the vibe of the room on that day, in that mood, at that moment. By doing that, we're able to keep a fresh spark in each performance. It's all about performing with heart and keeping everyone engaged. And you do that by keeping yourself engaged first. And here's a little bonus tip for you. Throw in a new song every now and then. Trust me. It's like adding a secret ingredient into the mix. Keep things exciting for you and the audience, right? And it's a challenge I'm working on myself, I gotta say. But hey, we're all in this together, right? So keep it new, keep it fresh. Number 7, thou shalt not drink unless it's coffee. All right, let's talk about the drinking scene here, why don't we? And no, I'm not saying you can't have maybe 1 or 2 if it's the right environment, though I'll admit I rarely indulge even that much. What I mean is, don't get caught up in the atmosphere to the point where you're knocking them back like you're one of the patrons. If you really want to come across as a pro, you've got to behave more like a member of the staff, right? Almost like you're hosting the event yourself. Sure, guests are going to offer to buy you drinks, but if you start throwing them back one after another, you might realize you've hit your limit, and now you're in the middle of a gig and you're over the edge. Trust me, being tipsy or worse during a performance is a surefire way to throw off your game. You may not think people notice it, but they do. So my advice, save the drinking for when you're off the clock and enjoying the party as a guest, not when you're up there on the stage giving it your all. Commandment number 8, thou shalt not exploit the perks. What does that mean? Well, most bars and restaurants, they're going to include a meal, right? And hosts at private events usually make sure you're fed too. It's a sweet deal, and you definitely should enjoy it. But it's important to remember why you're there in the first place. You're there to play music, not to feast like it's your last supper. So personally, I keep it chill when it comes to ordering food. I steer clear of the fancy things on the menu. I don't order the wallet-busting surf and turf on the menu. It just feels a bit off to me to do that, you know? Like you're trying to milk the venue for all that you can. I don't like the way it looks, and I don't think it's a smart idea. So let's be real. Unless you've got some special deal going on where that's your payment, you're getting paid to play, not to chow down. So appreciate the free food, appreciate the perks, but don't go overboard and make it look like you're taking advantage. Commandment number 9, thou shalt not be a spoiled sport. Let's be real, there are times when the crowd just isn't feeling it. They're not engaged, they don't seem to care, and tipping, forget about it. And then there are those gigs where the vibe is electric and everyone is having a blast, but still, the tips don't flow. It happens. Don't let it kill your vibe. As a pro, you've got to rise above it, as Nigel from Spinal Tap wisely said.
It's not going to affect my performance. Don't worry about it, all right? Just hate it. Really, it does disturb me, but I rise above it. I'm a professional, right?
Sure, I've heard musicians grumble when the audience isn't reacting how they'd like, and I get it. But hey, that's part of the gig. Think of it as a chance to learn and grow. Could you have done something differently? Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes it's just how the cookie crumbles. But hey, if you're getting paid to play music, you're already ahead in my book. All right, number 10, the last one. And this probably should have been the first one, but it's kind of like, I don't want to say boring, but it's the one that we kind of don't want to hear, but it's the most obvious because none of the other ones even matter if you don't adhere to number 10. Thou shalt not arrive late. They say timing is everything, right? They also say if you aren't early, then you're late. Well, I couldn't agree more. If you want to present yourself as a professional, then don't do what many other musicians do. Instead, show up fashionably early. For venues I know like the back of my hand, yeah, I'll aim to be there 30 minutes before showtime, factoring in any potential traffic or parking issues, especially in a bustling area where I live, like New York City. But if it's a new venue or a private event, I'll bump that arrival time up to an hour beforehand. At a private event especially, you're going to need someone who's familiar with the place to show you where you need to set up, to help you maybe find a power outlet or anything that's specific to the venue. And that takes time. So by getting there with plenty of time to spare, you can comfortably set up and you get to settle in before the performance begins. Another thing that I do, and I think is a good idea for you to do, is earlier in the day of the gig, I'll put the address of the venue into Apple Maps or Google Maps, and I'll get an idea of what the travel time is, right? But I'm keeping mindful that as the day goes on, traffic may start to build up, right? And become unpredictable. So if the traffic is starting to build up, you need to factor that in. And in New York, traffic is like a box of chocolates.
You never know what you're going to get.
Anyway, so you want to pay attention to the traffic and the maps so that you don't get yourself caught in a jam. Also, you want to factor in how long is it going to take you to pack your car and unpack your car. That all goes into the timing of it, and it could take longer than you expect. So plan for that. Let's get back to parking here because it's important. Always do your homework ahead of time when it comes to parking. So if you know you're in an area where you're going to have to find a parking lot, there's apps like ParkWiz that I use, which will tell you where the parking lots are that are near the venue. This way, you save yourself the headache of having to drive around the corner 100 times and stressing out looking for a parking spot. So by taking care of that beforehand, you kind of streamline the arrival process. You come to the parking lot, you take your gear out of the car, you put it on your rock and roller cart, which I suggest you get. Then you could roll into the venue with plenty of time to spare, and you can get yourself in the zone, and you can have a killer performance. I do it, and you could do the very same thing. So I hope that these 10 commandments that I have set forth will help you grow in your musical journey. And as always, I wish you the very best in your solo music career. If you have something to add, please leave a comment below, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.